Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Broadway and Breakaways, a Don't Puck with Media podcast. For those who did not get a chance to join us on Monday night, Monday was the 100th episode of Don't Puck with Media's podcasts. And I was announced as I will be joining and launching a Nashville Predators focused one. And, we're leaning into the puns with Broadway and Breakaways. As for anyone who hasn't been to Nashville, Broadway is the street to be on. And right smack dab in the middle of Broadway is Bridgestone Arena, where it is always a raucous time for the Nashville Predators. For this first episode, I want to tell a little bit more about myself, talk about my relationship to the Nashville Predators, my fandom, my experience, get into some things around the season so far. Continuing to throughout all of the episodes to talk more about Predators history, some of my favorite moments, where I'm excited about this team to go, or maybe some of my trepidations. And I also have my Twitter handle here. It's at Adam Biesman, Biesman, for anyone not able to see it. And feel free to drop me a follow or shoot me a DM. And I'd love to take any and all questions about Predators, get your opinions, my opinions, and really just have at it. So without further ado, a little bit more about me. My name's Adam Biesman. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I was actually born in Boston, lived here for 2 years, and had the great benefit of moving to Nashville in '98, the same year that the Nashville Predators got there. And I like to tell people that, I grew up with the hockey team, kind of like it was a sibling of mine, and now it's thriving. And I love seeing the team, the hockey town of Nashville, but it did not always used to be that way. And many people still don't even know that. I like to remind people that as a lot of fans, especially around me here in Boston, they're used to talking hockey because they grew up with it. They played pond hockey. They know the NHL. They know the league. They know the players. I went to school in Chicago, and Blackhawks, big rival. But not everyone around me in school, knows about hockey, but they knew about the Hawks. They knew maybe about their local team. I'd mention that I'm a big hockey fan. They say, "Who's your team?" I say, well, Nashville, of course. And the most common reaction was always, I didn't even know Nashville had a team. And it's sort of haha, chuckle, funny for a minute, but kind of deep down, that still bugs Nashville fans and probably some other small market, especially in the warmer weather, Florida ones too. And I think that sort of shapes a lot of the identity of who the Nashville Predators are. It's something that we kind of thrive off of. Growing up, the team was horrible. We had a ridiculously strict expansion draft that Minnesota and Columbus are familiar with as well, where teams were allowed to protect 7 defensemen, 10 forwards, and 2 goalies. So we were truly picking at scraps. And our first draft pick ever was David Legwand, who's pictured right here shaking David Poyle's hand. And I thought it'd be fitting to have him as the picture for my first episode too, given how important he was to our team, our franchise, our growth. He actually fittingly scored the icing game-winning or game-ending goal against Anaheim when we finally won our first playoff series in 2011. And it took a while before Nashville stuck, before hockey was real. I remember when my dad would go to some games before I was even old enough to go with him. Finally, I was able to go, I believe, in 2003 for my first game against the Ducks. Scratch that, it was the Rangers. It was 4-2. And it was electric. I actually remember turning to my dad and asking, why is everyone screaming? I was so confused. And I went to my second game, and that was against the Mike Modano's Stars. And the Predators scored twice in about a minute and a half or something. I could probably find the box score. And that's when I realized that there was something special here. In Tennessee, everyone loves football. The Titans were pretty new. Everyone knew about football. SEC football is huge. But this notion then that you could have electric action, as exciting as hockey was new. And it caught me at such a young age that I became quickly hooked. I really fell in love with the team. I fell in love with the chants, for a 7, 8, 9-year-old to be able to shout at a goalie, "Hey, you suck. It's all your fault," is one of the most fun feelings. And then to see that it's become this like European soccer style chant mixed with SEC football enthusiasm, it was contagious. And it wasn't just contagious to me, but, you fast forward a couple years, then the team's really struggling. It's not a surprise. They had a really tough hand that they had to face. And they just could not. They were making the playoffs finally in 2004. They just could not get out of the first round against Detroit, San Jose. Eventually, people stopped going to games. And the owner at the time was interested in moving the team to Hamilton, Ontario, about kind of like Hamilton to Toronto. For those in the US who don't know, it's like Anaheim to LA. They thought it would be this new market. Fans are rowdy. Toronto could easily support a second team financially, and I went to a game in 2007, and I left in the parking lot. It was the writing was so on the wall that my dad didn't even sugarcoat it to me. He said, I asked him, "Is this the last game that I'm going to go to for the Predators?" And he said, "Probably." And it sucked. It was one of those, but admittedly, in some ways, we hadn't seen success. We didn't know what it really felt like, but it was fun. It was our home team, and to see that potentially get ripped away when I didn't even fully understand kind of the business consequences to it really hurt. But that summer, there was a big rally at the time it was the Gaylord Entertainment Center, not Bridgestone, to save the Predators. And that year, some local Nashville businessmen swooped in. They came in and they said they bought it as a conglomerate. The multiple guys shared the ownership, and they brought Craig Leopold was the owner at the time, and he was not a Nashville guy. Like he didn't understand the culture. He wasn't a part of the city. It was not a good fit. So it was great to see that some guys who cared about and saw the value to the franchise, how they stepped in, and I'm forever grateful for it. Uh, not much longer. They had not much later, I should say. They drafted Pecorine, and at the time, there's a great article in the Players Tribune that I highly recommend anyone checking out that Pecorine wrote. But Pekka was, he's in Finland. He was not going to be playing for the Predators for a couple years. He would go through the farm system in Milwaukee, and he commented that he and his agent had never heard of Nashville. They knew of a couple cities in the US, and they were like, well, I guess we're going. So we'll find out. And he fell in love with the city too. And it sort of was this, and obviously we with him, he was an iconic goalie. Maybe he'll make the Hall of Fame, but if he doesn't make the Hall, he already has infinite status in Nashville. We've got a statue, we have his number, and he will forever be remembered also for just being such a gentleman and a leader in the community and everything that he did for the Children's Hospital there too. Finally, the Predators started turning the corner. In 2010, 2011, they were getting actually competitive teams. They were attracting free agents. Paul Kariya had come over. Peter Forsberg had come over. A little bit, they still had some left in the tank too before they gave it up. And you were starting to get some notoriety and people paying it a little bit more attention. And then in 2011, the Preds beat the Anaheim Ducks. They got their first ever series win, and it was the sweetest feeling. I remember exactly where I was sitting. I was lucky enough to be in the arena. It reached 110 decibels. The place was rocking. It's truly our barn. It's a flat roofed arena, and the noise just reverberates. And it was sort of like Nashville just wanted something big to celebrate. There was a huge flood like the year or two before that destroyed the downtown area all the way up to the arena. So to then see such an electric moment ignited something in the town. The next year, unfortunately, they didn't get out of the second round, but it was still a huge accomplishment. In the next year, they finally got their big bug off their back, which was the Detroit Red Wings. And that was a heated rivalry for a few reasons. And many people here who are deep Nashville lore lovers might remember that Nashville also has a lot in the auto industry, especially they used to have Saturn, they have Nissan headquarters, Bridgestone is North America headquarters is there now. A lot of those people were coming from Michigan. So we had a lot of Detroit fans present. We were right in the middle of the Central Division with them. This is all before the realignment years ago. And Detroit was good. They had like 5 Hall of Famers playing at the same time. We couldn't and the best goalkeeping. They went from Hasek to Osgood. We just had nothing that we could do to stop them. So when we finally got the chance to beat them in 2012, it really was this satisfying moment. I still remember the announcers exclaiming at the end that Honky Town has taken down Hockey Town. And that for us was a statement of, okay, we're not just winning like a fluke of a series. We're a good team. And from then on, it really became a sticking point. We made the playoffs about 9 years in a row, culminating with the best season was when they made the Stanley Cup in 2017. Ironically, their best regular season was the next one when they won the President's Trophy, but lost in the second round to the Winnipeg Jets. Since that year, it's sort of been a little bit downhill, and a little bit would be an understatement probably for any hockey fan to say about Nashville. They've maintained their fan vigor through the ups and downs, but I think there was a lot of a commitment to bring this championship and to bring it with a similar core. And David Poyle was an amazing general manager for us for many years. He set the record for most wins by a general manager, almost all of them coming with Nashville. He started the expansion draft. He was a little bit of a trade merchant at the deadline, and we'll talk about the deadline too in a little bit here. But he started to lose his touch a little in some more recent trades where it felt like you wanted to convince yourself that those trades were right, but then you start to see like we're probably getting fleeced here, or maybe not even getting fleeced, but maybe we're not prioritizing the right talent. You know, Ryan Hartman would be the big example, I would say, recently of a trade where we just overpaid the hell out of for him. We're giving up a first round pick for a guy that's never been more than a second liner, and at best. And we didn't go anywhere in those playoffs. We were a good team. We thought that we would get more offensive depth, and it just really didn't matter. So there was again like a little bit of this clinging to the past of we did it in 2016-17 season, had a great year the following. Well, just like that, we're now almost 10 years later, and the team's gotten worse. And it's fun to see that guys want to come and play in Nashville. Like we've been able to attract a lot of talent, but sometimes at the wrong time. So Matt Duchene would be a good example, how he always wanted to come. And every year it felt like we were about to trade for him. We were going to sign him. And finally he comes. And he was good offensively, not defensively. And eventually we probably ill-advised threw him away for almost nothing. We waived him. We bought him out. Dallas took him up for $5 million a year, and he was really productive there. And we couldn't, I'm sure, like the fact that the team didn't try to get any value out of him was very frustrating. And there are multiple players where we saw this same story repeat itself. We saw Kyle Turris get signed to this 6-year, $36 million deal. Well, we eventually sent him over to Edmonton while we continue to pay him $2 million a year for still, I believe. I think hopefully that dead money will be eaten soon. The Shea Weber contract, where we gave him at the time, it looked like you had to give it to him, but the money wasn't so much of the issue at the $110 million for 14 years. It was more of, my God, who knows that they're going to be in the NHL for another 14 years? And we found ourselves cash strapped with some of his contract. Then we had PK Subban, and we traded him. And at the right time, we just didn't get much back. We talked a little bit about this Monday for anyone that was able to listen in then too, about how some of those picks that we got in return in Nashville ended up with some players that are getting some serious ice time, just not in Nashville. So, we're very much in this really interesting crossroads where there are still a couple guys left on the 2017 roster that are going to be Nashville famous forever. And then there are a couple guys who are new and coming up, and then several guys, though, who are older. And that's sort of the definition, I would say, of the Predator season so far. Like shifting gears from that, I want to move into from the history of the Predators. I want to move into where we're at now. And one thing that I'd like to do for those listening is at the end of every episode, I might try to talk about some of my favorite games in history. What it felt like, where I was. I love just like the reliving through the fans' eyes about the game. And that's one of the beauties of hockey, is just how fast everything can change. But talking about this year, the Predators had horribly low expectations. People had written them off because last year it looked like this is conference finals or bust. They didn't even make the playoffs. They had just gotten Stamkos, Shea, Marchessault. They already had gotten Ryan O'Reilly the year before. Everyone thought, like, what a haul. This is a really strong way of going into this new chapter of Predators hockey. They're finally spending money. We had some young guys, and it was an abject failure, abject failure. And in some ways, that was some people think, is it because of coaching? Did we not have the right lines out there? Well, we couldn't score, which was crazy given the amount of talent that we have on power plays historically. That Marchessault, Stamkos, Forsberg, Yossi, and Ryan O'Reilly were not able to be a successful PP1 was concerning to a lot of people. People went from feeling very confident about the Andrew Brunette hire at coach to very suspicious. And at the beginning of this year, after their slow start now, everyone on Nashville Twitter talking about it, we're like, it's got to be Brunette. He's got to go midseason. It's done. Weirdly, the Predators then ripped off a win streak. And I don't know if that was a good thing long term, because we're in this very awkward situation where Money Puck has the Predators at a 20% chance of making the playoffs. They're just a few points out of a wild card spot. Like I at the moment, I think it's based on it's about 3 or 4 based on how you also measure with games in hand, etc. Um, but they're not necessarily built for long-term success at the moment. They have Steven Stamkos and Ryan O'Reilly as some of their most productive scorers. Stamkos already up to 27 goals. Okay, that's great. He had only 4 in his first 22 games. So he has been electric. He's been hot. He has multiple hat tricks, Forsberg 2. But he's in his 30s. Ryan O'Reilly's in his 30s. Roman Yossi's in his 30s. Eric Haula as well. We have no center depth whatsoever. And if this team is going to make the playoffs, it's probably going to be contingent on those same guys continuing to contribute. There's not been a lot of, the history of Nashville has never been an offensive powerhouse, and our third and fourth lines continue to ring that true. And there's opportunity for some of the guys in those lines to step up and produce. And there are a lot of young guys, but they like exclusively all of the success that has driven us to be in this playoff hunt is on the veterans. So that kind of is this fascinating crossroads where, as I said, Brunette then was the one that everyone wanted to chop his head off. And then out of nowhere, Trotz is the one that's gone at his own doing. So, like, fast forward, or rewinding a little bit, Brunette was. Everyone probably deservedly thought that he had a lot of issues. We couldn't get our lines together. We couldn't score. We lacked discipline. And then things started to work, but enough for the year, like enough to show that the coach was the one involved in stepping it up. Unfortunately, Barry Trotz probably did make the right decision in stepping down. And I say unfortunately because no Nashville Predator fan is going to look back at the Barry Trotz tenure and be upset about what he's done for Nashville. If anything, they'll probably it's sad that he wasn't the one that could sort of take us to the promised land and get Lord Stanley's Cup down here in Nashville. But we had now, having been playing since 99 in Nashville, we're now in the 27th year of Nashville Predators hockey, and every single GM has been either David Poile or Barry Trotz. And Barry Trotz was his protege. It was his first coach. He brought him in as an assistant to train him as David Poile was on his way out. And there are so many amazing memories with Barry Trotz behind the bench. And he's a great leader in the Nashville community, but he's struggled to. I don't think he fully understood what it is and what it's like to be a GM and really everything that's involved in that. And one of the alarm bells that started to go off for people was in the draft this year. The Predators, because of their terrible season the year before, had a high pick. And it was a deep draft, and there are a lot of exciting opportunities. It was no Bedard Celebrini opportunities if they had that were going to be available to them, but still a lot of a significant forward opportunities that the Predators could go get. And the draft is going, and all of a sudden, Nashville takes Brady Martin, who no one thought was going to be a top 5 pick, let alone maybe even a top 10 pick. And there were other more talented guys available, and Nashville was just in an uproar. Like so many options for them to go after, and they went after someone who I don't remember who it was on our pod on Monday. Very appropriately called him a project. He had a good camp, good off season, showed well in kind of the with our young guys skating in over the summer. But he's got a ways to go. He's a physical guy, but his skill is not quite the same as what we could have gotten, and he's not quite as natural of a goal scorer. It's one of these scenarios, though, where it's sort of like when you got to root for your pilot, no matter who it is, because you're on the plane. It's sort of how I feel a little bit now about the pick with Brady Martin is obviously we want this to work. There's a very real chance that this doesn't work. So now we're kind of strapped with, uh, we didn't get the best first round pick that we could have, and we're loaded with vets. So Nashville is fortunate that they do have good young players coming up, but not enough to like go ahead and start fielding the team right now. We had been seeing Matthew Wood, who was the first round pick in 2020 two or three, I believe, who finally he got his NHL debut, and he actually got a hat trick at the Garden. It was albeit in a loss, but it's a big step for a rookie in New York City under the lights to go in and get all those goals. But he had a super hot 2 week stretch, and then he got very quiet. Fedor Svechkov had like 7 points in 49 games. They sent him back to Milwaukee. Luke Evangelista, quietly, has had a lot of assists. I know it sounds like he's already been around forever, but he's only 24. And he still has a lot of upside. But he needs to be able to score more, and I think he's still he's a little small. Uh, Other guys that we still haven't even seen yet much of at all are Joakim Kemmel. Tanner Malendic has not come up. I think that they've been playing a lot of carousel with the back of the third line on defense, somewhat due to injury and somewhat due to we're not sure what's working. So it's a lot of unknowns, and I think that it's an exciting time if you can truly lean into letting these young guys play. And we somewhat need to accept that this Nashville Predators team is not going to beat Colorado probably a single time if they played 4 times. I know they beat them 7-3 a few weeks ago. That was exciting, unbelievable for Ryan O'Reilly too to get his hattie. But Nashville is just simply unmatched against a team as powerful as Colorado, who's basically bankrolling the Team Canada a hockey team this year in Milan, which I want to get to in just a little bit here too. So I'm sitting here thinking I love watching the Predators win, but I am in agreement with many guys that I would like to see us win more. And if we have guys who are pure rentals, guys that could go compete, maybe add a little bit of value, like Eric Holla, I think we got to be opening those spots for our young guys to come in and at least get some reps. We have one of the worst, if not the worst, center depth in the NHL. The only two that we could consistently say are starting are Ryan O'Reilly and Eric Holla. We used to have Colton Sissons as our stable third line center, face-off merchant. He's now in Vegas. We traded him, did a lot for the Nashville Predators, but unfortunately, not with us anymore. And I think that this is the time that we have to start experimenting. Get these guys their reps, allow ourselves, maybe they'll surprise and they'll be able to give us a run and keep the momentum. And maybe you don't trade someone like Stamkos. Maybe you keep him because he is that productive that he'll be able to still manage the top line, second line. They've moved him around a lot recently. So I don't know who they're going to end up running him with for the rest of the season. But he could be the veteran presence while he's also producing. On the flip side, his value is absolutely skyrocketed from the beginning of the season. The Nashville Predators could get a haul. Now, if Artemi Panarin's trade is any indication, maybe not quite as much of a haul, but he's been simply because he's older, but he has been playing at over a point per game in his last 20 or so games. And it's thrilling to watch. It's amazing that every time he gets the puck, he's a threat to score. And he just had his most exciting game of the season against St. Louis a few days at this point, probably a week and a half ago. The Preds were down 5-1, and they won that game. And my favorite stat actually of that game is not about the Steven Stamkos hat trick. It's that St. Louis now has a losing record in games where they've led by 4 this year. They are 1-2. And I think that if anyone was wondering if St. Louis is in sell mode, they should absolutely be in sell mode. But this year, because of the Olympics, there's this awkward break where teams can have all this extra time. They can't make anything happen, but they can be aware of maybe things that they should be doing. So Nashville is hopefully sitting on all of this information, and they are deciding where they're going to go. I mean, like, hopefully none of the players that we could be considering moving or leaning on are going to get injured in Milan. A few notable guys that are playing for Nashville: Yossi, Forsberg, Saros, Hala. But those guys, fortunately, have tended to be pretty injury secure, knock on wood. Where this gets even more interesting, though, is Barry Trotz has said that he's retiring, but he will stay on until his successor is identified, which means he will continue to work the deadline. Now, that's good that someone's got to run the deadline, but no one's been impressed with what he's been able to get done. So people are also very worried about that. There really hasn't been a trade in Nashville's recent past that has worked out successfully, other than the Tanner Jeannot one. Even when they sent Matthias Ekholm to Edmonton, it felt like you got it. You had to try to get something. They got Reed Schaefer and I believe a first, and nothing has developed from that yet. So there's trepidation that even if he does decide to trade some of the big guys, like what's going to happen? Are we going to be able to get an appropriate haul that can justify it? Or are we going to do what an own rental, as I believe he called last year, when we had a guy that was on the trading block and we decided not to trade. And we just treated it as if we had acquired him during the regular season via trade, but we just kept him, which is an odd way of explaining the deadline to your own fan base who's clamoring for some growth and support. One thing that has been a good sign, somewhat, is that Nashville decided to engage CAA. So they are, for those not familiar, they're one of the biggest agencies that they represent artists, athletes, coaches alike, everyone around in all areas of the entertainment industry. And my immediate reaction is this is incredible. Like, they're finally stepping out of the organization. For the longest time, it looked like it would stay within Nashville. It would be David Poyle to Barry Trotz, maybe Scott Nickel, or David Poyle's son even. And this, to me, was the indication that they know they need a new mold, that they need a completely new vision, and someone who can manage the existing roster while also continuing to draft well and scout, and ideally continue to lean into analytics. As we've seen, some teams do very well and some teams do a lot of analytics, and it is not proving to work out well, like Toronto. So I'm not saying at all that analytics is the solution, but it offers a backbone, and that's something that Trotz does not have the experience in. He couldn't be driven by that because that's never how he coached or how he managed a team. Unfortunately, there was conflict of interest ruled, I think it was by the NHLPA, about that contract. So CAA did have to walk away. But I think that it's a good, Nashville fans should be grateful that they're starting to look externally and not just focus on who's the obvious hire. NHL teams do this all the time. It's one of my biggest grievances. I'm currently in business school. See a lot of leadership decisions, and good ones and bad ones. And in the NHL, it's a lot of failing upward. Once you get that first head coaching job, no matter how it goes, people then see you as a legitimate candidate. It's one of my biggest gripes, in that no matter how good you were, you're seen as an experienced hire. So take Peter Laviolette, for instance. He has had some great teams. He's actually he might be the only American coach who has taken 3 different teams to the Stanley Cup: the Hurricanes, the Flyers, and the Predators. But every time he's gone somewhere, the team has also devolved. And he has not sort of been the character to build it back up. It always starts good and it gets horrible. So New York makes the decision to go hire Peter Laviolette next, the Rangers. What happens there? You could have guessed it. Amazing first year. Offense couldn't score to save their life. And they have already moved on from him to Mike Sullivan, and that's gotten even worse. The Rangers look like a team that had to sell. They sold Artemi Panarin and got nothing for it. Again, we talked at great length about Chris Drury and his amazing ability to withstand all the heat in New York. So, I'm glad that Nashville's not making that mistake, but there's always the risk that they go for another GM merchant or someone who has been around for too long. Right now, there's no clear front runner. So, stay tuned. I'm definitely following Twitter journalists who are posting about this as much as possible. There have been a couple names linked here and there, but I think it's a very early in the process. And hopefully they take like their true amount of diligence to get someone good. Uh, Unfortunately, they won't be able to help out with the deadline, but they will be able to help out with the draft ideally. So it would be great. I think all Nashville fans would agree that we gotta have this pick before the end of the season or by the end of the season at the latest so they can get the draft board ready, which is already pretty late. Usually at this point, all the front offices are already working on the draft. College hockey is in full swing. We're about to get to the Frozen Four in just a few weeks. There's a lot of talent. And, later on, as we get closer, we'll start talking a little bit more about draft and prospects. But again, we don't even know who's going to be in the driver's seat for Nashville. So kind of going to pause that conversation. We'll continue to monitor any trade deadline information that comes up. For those not familiar, the deadline is March 6th. And play resumes on February 24th after the Olympic break. So not a lot's going to happen over the next 2 weeks or so because it can't. So all the players are out. But soon after, we expect some bigger changes and probably a lot more to still happen as we get really right up to the day of the deadline too. That brings me to the Olympics. I would like to talk a little bit more about my passion for the national team, for what we can potentially expect this year for the U.S., for some of the Nashville Predators that are playing. Actually, and sort of the breaking news of today that's not that big of a deal, but Roman Josi has been named as the Switzerland team captain. Not a surprise. He is probably their most talented player while also their most talented leader. He is a gentleman on and off the ice and is so skilled that for anyone who hasn't had the chance to watch him, I hope you can. He's still playing at peak levels, not quite his Norris Trophy days, but continues to just outshine and outperform everyone on the ice. Even when he was in his Norris Trophy days, it was like watching a dance, the way that he could go from one red line to the other, and his ability to be an offensive, defensive player has been tremendous. The other Nashville Predators that are of note that will be playing are, as we alluded to earlier, Philip Forsberg, who is weirdly listed as the 13th forward for for Sweden in their roster. So we'll monitor what his playing time looks like. I don't know why he would have been considered the alternate there. I don't know if there was an injury, a typo, or just some lack of or some miscommunication, but he's certainly one of their strongest forwards. And then Eric Haula and UC Saros will be suiting up for Finland. I guess we can touch on UC Saros really quickly from a Nashville standpoint too. Not his best year for us at all, but still a fan favorite. And Nashville's been super lucky that we have had such minor goalie transition as we went from Fokun to Rene and then Saros. So, wishing nothing but the best for all these guys. It's super fun to watch the national hockey teams. So I know in the beginning I talked about my love for Nashville hockey, but I do have great childhood memories too of the U.S. team and watching them play. And obviously the big one was the London Olympics. Sorry, not London, but in 2012 when or 2010, I keep mixing up the Olympic years, when the US and Canada had their gold medal game that came down, of course, to the Sidney Crosby overtime winner. But in Vancouver, that was, to me, the most exhilarating experience that you could imagine. You have guys who are playing their absolute hardest in a game that they're not getting paid for, and for their teams. And it was a full-on all-star game, NHL all-star game. And it didn't go the way of the United States, but it was one of those where it's just hats off to everyone who played. Fast forward, the next Olympics was the TJ Oshie one, where the US is in what felt like the never-ending shootout with Russia. And TJ Oshie and Bobrovsky just go back and forth, and TJ Oshie had them beat every time. That's one thing to note, is in the Olympics for shootouts, you can use the same players, unlike in the NHL, until you've gone through like literally your entire team, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of an NHL shootout. Growing up, too, I was familiar with Miracle, 1980 hockey team. Whenever I was in school, if anyone ever asked me, where do you want to go back to in history, I would always say Lake Placid, 1980. And I've only gotten more resolute in that decision as I've gotten older. I've continued to read about the significance of a national sports moment and how it brings people together, especially the underdog story of it all, no question. But when you have a team moment in all of the games that are involved, just to go get the gold, again, guys just playing for their country, that was really a powerful story, especially, very much so in the mix of the geopolitical context of the time, where the US felt like there was just a lot of social fabric being ripped apart, that you had something as unifying as the Olympics, and then an underdog team, no less, that people could rally behind. It still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And there was an article that was written that summer that I still read like every year. It's in the Sports Illustrated Vault, and it profiles different scenarios of where people were in the country when that game happened. How one person was going to an immigrant-run grocery store, and the owner does not speak a lot of English. The guy at the store tells the owner, "Yeah, we won," because as he asks, like, what happened in the game, and the immigrant owner breaks down in tears, saying, "We won, our boys won." It was like to really see that everyone of all different aspects, strangers, were just coming together. And then in like the most heartbreaking way for a high school boy to experience, to see that wasn't about getting rejected going to prom, the NHL decided to shut down the program. They did not let their players play in the Olympics or play in anything to represent their national team for now 12 years, or sort of 11 years. And that was crushing. It really took out a lot of the excitement, this desire to relive one of my favorite moments in sports history was never going to be seen, because we would always have the washed up veterans or young guys that played maybe internationally or never really made it. It was great that they were donning the red, white, and blue, but it wasn't the same energy or power that we knew we could bring to the ice. So last year, when the NHL decides to implement the Final Four, or the Four Nations, between Finland, Sweden, US, and Canada at the All-Star break, it was like an interesting thought. I think a lot of I was curious. I didn't really think people would take it that seriously. I liked the idea of doing something else. Separately, we can talk about in another episode maybe my gripes with all-star games generally across all sports. I think that they should just be lists that people are put on, and every player just gets vacation, because why should the best players be punished with more time of playing a game that doesn't help their team and just risks injury? I think that's more of the older Adam talking. Younger Adam would have been like, "Oh, of course I want to go see, Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin in some, duel," but of course it was meaningless. And the players showed us wrong. They showed us that was not something that they were taking lightly, that it was the first time that in a de facto national game was allowed to be played since 2014 with NHL players in it. And obviously, for the four teams that were picked, their rosters probably would not have looked a bit different if they had opened it to non-NHL players, with a couple exceptions probably for Sweden and Finland. Uh, so to see the energy that was brought into the US and Canada games, especially when they had their first matchup in the Bell Center in Montreal. And I remember this. I was actually in Canada during this game. It was so cold, like 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm sitting in this cabin. I'd been trying to go ski. I was skiing earlier that day. I'm wearing actually a Mike Fisher jersey, or sorry, a PK Subban jersey. I'm on the lift to go up, and I'm sitting next to this guy who asks me, "You a Subban fan or a Predators fan?" I said, "Preds first, Subban second." He said, "No kidding, like Mike Fisher's my cousin." And I'm like, of all the times that I wear a Subban jersey, I'm in Canada. I'm not expecting anyone to even, give a rat's ass about the Predators. And then there I am meeting Mike Fisher's cousin, and we were already, trash talking a little bit about the game. So I'm hyped up. I'm ready to go. I even considered going into Montreal from Tremblant where I was, but it was super cold, huge snowstorm, buried up in this cabin, and we turn it on. And, again, didn't really know what to expect out of this game. All of a sudden, the fights start breaking out, and I'm getting the volume up. Like, even the people who are not hockey fans are now kind of tuning in. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, the energy is palpable in the room. And here I am thinking, I've done this a million times. You throw in a hockey game, and all of a sudden, people who didn't realize that they were into hockey are actually into hockey. So the game ends. It's beautiful. US wins. We're all feeling fun and good. And we come back to Boston just the next day. And the finals for the Four Nations were in Boston here. So I had the not the chance, unfortunately, to go to the game because those tickets got absurdly expensive once people realized how great the energy was. But I was able to go to a bar right next to the Garden, and it was standing room only pretty much, and everyone was decked out. There were US, there were Canada fans. It was very, very like good energy on both ends. No one was, it didn't feel like a heated rivalry game, but it felt like a passion project where each team just really wanted that victory. And, props to Canada. They're a great team. They're probably still the favorites to win the gold this year. Not even probably, they should be. They've got Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, and Sidney Crosby in that order in first, second, and third lines. Their only weakness is going to be goalie. Who is going to be a consistent tender for them? That's the one advantage that the U.S. probably has, and they're going to really need to lean into. But when you've got lines as deep as Canada's got, it's going to be really hard to see how the U.S. is going to keep them off the board enough. I know they did it in the Four Nations, but it's going to be a huge challenge, and the U.S. will need some luck probably too. No shame on the U.S. team; they've got a lot of talent, a lot of exciting players. I think I'm curious to see how their offense is. And particularly, they don't have Cole Caulfield, Jason Robertson, some of the young, like real energy boosters who are natural goal scorers too. And Austin Matthews has been named the captain of the team, which, proud American, probably one of the top American players or at least goal scorers. The Kachuk brothers are obviously going to be fired up, ready to play. So I would still expect that Canada and the US will be the top two teams, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Sweden, maybe Finland, managed to sneak in there and get into that gold medal game instead of the United States. So there's a lot of parity. It's not like, seasons, or I should say Olympics in the past, where it's been a clear favorite one or two. There's obviously the main omission of Russia. For say what you will about all of the geopolitical circumstances there. I'm not going to get into that, but there's obviously a lot of talent and Russian talent who do not have the opportunity to play. It would certainly add to the spice of the Olympics if they did, and the historic rivalries that have existed. But for now, we're still going to get a lot of great hockey. It starts tomorrow for the U.S. men's and Canada men's teams, but the U.S. women's team has already been rolling, and they just beat Canada yesterday 5-0. They were walking in as the favorites though, so that should be no surprise, and hopefully they continue to keep it up. I believe they outscored their opponents 19-1 in the opening round, so they're making us proud. They're making us proud. But look, it's awesome to sit here and be able to talk hockey when we get back from the Olympic break, we'll take a little bit more of a look into the upcoming games that the Predators have and also how that's going to impact their trade deadline decisions. Uh, they they might wait until March 6th. They might have start lining up some opportunities. The good game theory in them would say, let's wait and see if we can get the best offers that we can field. We've seen trades come in, and it always ends at 4 p.m. Eastern. We've seen trades come in the last minute. A couple years ago, there was a Kevin Fiala for Mikael Granlund trade. Definitely did not win that one in Nashville. I think everyone would agree that Mikael Granlund ended up being one of our worst forwards that we've acquired in a while. He's a steady guy on penalty kill, but that was about it. Whereas Kevin Fiala is actually also playing for Switzerland and has been able to establish himself as an offensive threat with Minnesota and LA. But anyways, as I alluded to, kind of the way I want to close out some of this first pod and hopefully others to come, and is with one of my favorite moments as a Predators fan. And I want to, I'll highlight other games as we go too, throughout the pod. And feel free to message me if there's a favorite one of yours that you'd like me to talk about. But I remember in 2016, the Predators were playing the Sharks. It was the second round, and it was game 3. So the Predators were down 2-0. As they say, it's never a series until a home team loses a game, but they were on the verge of losing a game. And I had been it was Cinco de Mayo. I remember that. It was May 5th. I had been invited to a party, and I texted my friend, I gotta get some homework done. So let me finish that and then I'll come by. By homework, it meant tune in and watch this Preds Sharks game. So I thought this will be fine. The game will be over by I think it was like 8 o'clock Central. Surely it's gonna be over by 11. I'm at home. I'm watching. We're losing 3-2, and then James Neal buries and goes top cheddar and makes it 3-3 late in the third period. I go ballistic. I start shouting. I'm like freaking out. My roommates come out. They're starting to wonder, like, what is going on? Even the people in the apartment above, who are also my friends because it was college, of course, they come on down. They're like, is everything okay? I heard something. I'm like, yeah, no worries. Like the Preds tied the game. So now I go into like our common room, and I have the game on, and some other people start watching, and they're getting super invested. And the game keeps going. First overtime. Okay, tense. San Jose actually scored a goal that they will claim to this day, which should have ended the game in the first period of overtime. We go to the second one. Nothing. The players are absolutely gassed. So am I, but I wasn't the one that was putting in 45 minutes of ice time. And finally, at the end of the second overtime, my roommate, who has now been hooked, says to me, I got to go to bed, man. I'm sorry. Please don't wake me if the Predators win. And I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, fair enough. It's like 1 a.m. right now. It's late. It's just a weeknight. And I'm watching in bed. Like I've just transitioned. I'm watching on my laptop, and I'm so tired. I think to myself, whatever happens in this game, I'll just process it in the morning. And I had the volume on just low enough where I could hear it, but no one else. And all of a sudden, you hear that Ekholm gets a shot right off of Jones, and it goes straight into Mike Fisher's skate, who kicks it forward to himself, and he buries it in the back of the net. And the adrenaline rush that just shot through my body. I jumped out of bed. I ran right into my friend's room, and I woke him up immediately without even thinking about it. And he wasn't even pissed. He was actually pumped. He was like, this is so sick. It became one of the greatest moments, and still in Predators history. The announcers were just we're just shouting. Like the Nashville local ones didn't even have anything to say. The national broadcast was just shouted seventh heaven in Nashville. And I remember saying that Mike Fisher is now more popular than Carrie Underwood here in Nashville. And in some ways he was very right. Definitely didn't last probably, but he's still a fan favorite. And that is just one of those moments that shows just how exciting hockey is, how Nashvillians were picking up on it. And it really became like a contagious energy. My friend got so hooked. He's actually from Boston. He was never a hockey fan, that he started to become a bit of a Predators fan. And the next year was the year we went to the Cup, and he watched every game with me, rooted for it, still would ask about, the offseason decisions, etc. So, for all those Predators fans out there that are going to be able to listen, tune in, watch with your friends, even if it's on your phone or your laptop, people will watch, people will wonder, and you can show them just how great this team is and the excitement and the journey that we've had. So anyways, thank you all so much for tuning in for my first broadcast. I can't wait for several other episodes to talk more specifics once the break is over about the team, and continue to talk about some of the best memories in Predators history. Like I said, follow me on Twitter. It's Adam Beisman, and shoot me a DM if you have any questions, something to discuss. And looking forward to the next one. Thanks, everybody.